Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. It's Tuesday, July 21st, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Friday is the first day of Chiefs training camp, and it will include quarterbacks, rookies, and maybe a few others who need a little extra time to get their motors running up in St. Joseph. The entire squad will check into Missouri Western a few days later. It's the start of the 2026 season, and we have plenty of questions about the team that finished 6-11 last year and out of the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Chiefs beat writer Pete Sweeney is here to provide answers. We'll discuss the position groups and sort out the strengths and weaknesses of a team looking to get back on track. After our conversation, I'll tell you what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. Well, before we talk football, let's talk football. Did you watch the World Cup final?
I did. I was hoping for as good a game as the third place game was, from a scoring standpoint. Certainly wasn't that way, just clearly an outmatched team. I'd seen that maybe the Argentina victory over England kind of dictated it not being as exciting. I think now in retrospect, England and Spain probably would have been a better game, but that's soccer, right? It kind of does have some parallels to American football, and you get one shot at this, and it doesn't matter if maybe you would have won 7, 8, 9 times out of 10. You ended up losing that day, and I think that's what happened to Argentina.
Kind of riveting for a very low scoring game, 1-0 game. I thought one of the best lines I saw on social media afterwards was Argentina honored the New York Jets, who used that stadium by not scoring.
Or even having any semblance of hope of scoring based upon the shots. I did, text with friends. And again, I'm going to be open here. Like, I'm a very casual fan of soccer / football. This rule that's always existed where you just lose a player for the rest of the game. It's like, imagine the NFL, they're just like, you're not going to have a free safety for the rest of the 3 quarters. Good luck winning. Like, it's such a wild rule to me, but.
What other sport, right? I mean.
Hockey, it's
temporary.
Yeah.
You get 2 minutes at a time.
It kind of is a death sentence when you're playing a team that good. So, that proved to be the case.
Yeah, it could have been like a 45-minute power play if we'd gone to the extent. Okay, but let's talk football. The Chiefs report to training camp on Friday. Not all the Chiefs. Tell us who's going to be there for the first few days.
Yeah, typically it's rookies and quarterbacks. It's called the rookie and quarterback camp, essentially, unofficial name. But sometimes it'll be past that, right? Like, you'll have a second-year player that might have made it last year and didn't, maybe landed with the practice squad, came back on a futures. Player that might have been injured last year as just starting to get their feet wet. I would certainly think that maybe Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Omar Norman-Lott could fall into that category. It doesn't necessarily mean that those injured veterans will be there, but often and oftentimes past, we've seen players still rehabbing. No sense in not getting there a little early if you're going to have to do the rehab in Kansas City anyway. So certainly, definitely Patrick Mahomes, all the drafted rookies we expect to see there, but we could see some other faces.
Well, and all eyes will be on Patrick Mahomes when we get to camp. He'll typically, this would be the first time he's arrived at camp coming off an injury that sidelined him for the end of the previous year. There's never been a training camp where Mahomes entered as a starter where he wasn't the first voice that we've heard, coming out, the player's voice that we've heard, standing in front of the dorm with prospects for the season. Do we expect him to be that player? What is the expectation for Patrick Mahomes, at least at the beginning of training camp?
Yeah, I tend to think that they'll stick with the script. I don't think it makes sense on day one to throw Justin Fields up there. I mean, I'd imagine if anything, it would be Andy and Andy alone, and then we'll get players in the following days. I think the only thing that we've seen common with just the way Chiefs do press conferences and communication, a lot of times they'll wait till the player gets a full practice in, or again, this feels a little different because I think everyone is going to want an update from the horse's mouth, which is Mahomes. So to me, it's we'll definitely get Andy. We'll definitely get an update. We'll see on Mahomes. I hope we get an opportunity to speak with him. I think based upon what we saw in OTAs, should there not have been a setback. And I mean, Blair, I don't know if you've been privy to this. Pat McAfee said he was dancing and cutting rug up at the Kelsey Swift wedding. Then I tend to think we're going to see him that first day of practice now, just to the extent of what he's going to be able to do. Like I almost think you almost need to put a green jersey on him to even emphasize, let's like not touch this guy if you are going to throw him into the fire.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see the first few days, just to what extent we see Mahomes running around at training camp. All right. Speaking of sticking to the script, let's. I thought what we would do is we'll talk about position groups.
Sure.
And I'll come up with a question for each one. We already covered quarterback, so let's shift to running back. And let me ask you this: after Ken Walker, who's the number 2 running back for these Chiefs?
I think a lot of people are going to hope that my answer is Emmett Johnson. I think others will hope that it's Brashard Smith, but I do think they brought Amari DiMercato in for a reason, right? Brashard Smith to me is now going to transition based on the moves into more of a weapon piece, gadget type player, the motion in the backfield, some of those orbit motions, getting the ball in his hands fast and returning. I mean, it's just kind of the way that it seemed. DeMercado was interesting. He has just a tremendous yards per carry rate. He just didn't get the ball a lot in Arizona behind James Conner, and so now you bring DeMercado. I think it's going to be a bigger role for him in Kansas City than it was in Arizona. I think the Chiefs went and got him for a reason. To me, it's Walker on those early downs. And the reason why I say let's pause on Emmett Johnson is I think the Chiefs really like this kid, but they've been forward and forthcoming about his issues in pass protection. So to me, DeMercado will start the season. He's a very good pass protector. And then maybe as Johnson develops, you'll see more and more of him midway through the end. But that to me is how the running back room is going to shake out.
All right, at tight end, you mentioned the social event of the year just a moment ago. Travis Kelce be impacted by that, do you think? To what extent will we see first of all, we expect him to be there when the veterans report on the 29th, the following week. I just remember Travis Kelce coming to camp 2 years ago, kind of for Kelce standards, by Kelce standards, a little out of shape.
Right.
Changed the following year, last year. I thought he was in great shape. What kind of shape will Kelce be in this time?
Yeah, I think he came into last year in his own mind saying, like, this really could be it. I know that there's been a question these past few years of, is he going to hang it up? And I think he probably went in to the season thinking we're at least going to be in the playoffs, right? But it ended up being a complete derailing and disaster. He wasn't able to play the final snaps of his career if it would have been with Patrick Mahomes. It was all these backup quarterbacks. And for me, I think the motivation for him to come in as good a shape last year is he thought it was the end. Now I definitely think this is the end. I think he's definitely thinking it's the end. He wanted to do one more shot with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that hasn't been official yet, but you just get the feeling like this is it based upon how they built the contract with the void years and so on. So to me, yeah, I think he'll be close. Not to say he'll be in the same exact shape, but it'll be closer to, what would have been that good shape in 25 to like some of the questionable looks maybe in the year prior.
Chiefs beat writer Pete Sweeney is here, and we're talking about training camp, which starts Friday at Missouri Western. On the offensive line, 4 positions are all but set, right? But that 5th position, right tackle, that's kind of a mystery, isn't it? It's Jalen Moore's to begin with, but then what?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jalen Moore was a good addition. He was an important addition last year, especially when Josh Simmons missed time, with his personal leave. And you have to have a good swing tackle. But everything the Chiefs have kind of told us since Jalen Moore has come to the team is they do not see him as a starter. I do still think he's the favorite right now because he has had the most experience in the room. I think he'll get the first crack at it. But even the fact that Andy Reid is lightly, floating out other possibilities at the position, when you talk about Esapole from last year, and even the newcomer that will also be in the mix is Khalil Benson out of Indiana. Undrafted free agent, is now, with the Chiefs in Kansas City. I think he will continue to get opportunities like we saw a little bit during OTAs. And to me, it's a 3 to 4 man battle at right tackle if you also want to include Chu Godric, but I just tend to think that he's on the outside looking in. I think I want to be one of the top 3 I mentioned.
But Trey Smith at right guard, Creed Humphrey, Kingsley Suamataia, Josh Simmons. I'm looking for a bigger season from Kingsley Suamataia, who took a nice step, right? From when they moved him from tackle to guard, but now I think he has the potential to maybe be a Pro Bowl player.
Yeah, I agree. And, he's next to 2 of the better offensive linemen and well-paid offensive linemen in the league. So there's plenty of motivation. It's going to be another year of strength. This is still a young player. And to me, we've talked about it almost ad nauseum as we wait for practices to finally begin. But it seems like the Chiefs are going to rework their offense into a little bit more of that ground and pound under center type of looks now that you do have Ken Walker and he's such an asset, with some of those inside runs. And so I'm eager to see. I think quietly the Chiefs have the best interior maybe in the entire NFL. You wonder, can Josh Simmons put together a full season by staying available, staying healthy, and then again that right tackle question we mentioned.
With the improvement of the running game, the expected improvement in the running game, and maybe a little shift of emphasis there, should Chiefs fans be a little less concerned about the questions at wide receiver right now?
I mean, I'm not sure. I understand them. I thought Tyquan Thornton had a really nice, surprising breakout in a sense in the first 6 games, and then all of a sudden guys were available and healthy. And you got to remember, Hollywood Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster were on the team. They were taking up more than 1,000 snaps, and to me, more than 100 targets. So that's going to open things up for Thornton, who I think will get a full season. But in front of him, those are the guys that have to be the go-to targets for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Rashee Rice has to stay on the field for legal reasons and conduct reasons, but you also hope that he has a healthy season. I think Xavier Worthy really was forthcoming also in saying how impacted he was by the shoulder. But those 3 guys have to be, your key pass catchers for Patrick Mahomes. I think the room is young and interesting beyond them. But such a big year for Rashee Rice. And, I know that conversation's sort of steering away of this at times has been a selfish player. If that worries you, I guess my counter to that would be, if you're worried about him being selfish, it's a contract year. If there's ever a year that he's going to be motivated to stay on the field, have good conduct, be productive, it's this year when really he can force what will be the Chiefs or another team's hand in saying, I want top wide receiver money. I mean, we've seen too many times in the NFL. It really doesn't matter some of your past discretions if you're able to put up production. I think that's going to be highly motivating for Rashee Rice.
I love the contract year. You usually get a lot of, as you said, motivated play from players in their contract year. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little defense. We're back on SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR, here with Chiefs beat writer Pete Sweeney. We're talking Chiefs, who report to Missouri Western in St. Joe on Friday, at least the quarterbacks and the rookies do, for the start of season number 67 for the Chiefs. First 3 were in Dallas, next 64 in Kansas City. We've talked about the offense and some of the questions that we have going into the season on that side of the ball. We have more questions on defense. Pete, let's start with defensive end, and I'll ask you, among George Karlaftis and Ashton Gillotte and Felix Anudike-Uzomah and R. Mason Thomas, the drafted rookie, which of those players really needs to step up?
Oh, it has to be Gillotte. I mean, this was a player that the Chiefs really liked last year. His talk with us during the offseason said he really didn't like what he saw on tape, thought he was thinking too much. He thinks another year in Steve Spagnuolo's system will allow him to play free. I tend to agree. They're really high on Ashton Gillotte, and you kind of know what you're getting from your other base 3. Like that's going to be Karlaftis, Chris Jones, and Kairos Tonga. Karlaftis had similar sentiments to Xavier Worthy, playing with a broken hand for half the season. I expect his production to be back up. Chris Jones is still has still been productive. Now, the sacks have not been as close to where he was at his peak. But if you look at pressures, along the interior, he's still a guy that's going to be eating up a lot of attention. And that's where I think, Gelati has to come in. I mean, you're going to see opposing offensive lines that are more likely to be giving attention to Chris Jones and George Karlaftis. Theoretically, that opens up one-on-ones. Gelati has got to step up and take. I don't think you can reasonably expect anything significant unless he comes back extremely healthy and has even grown in strength and technique in Felix. And then R. Mason Thomas, to me, is going to be that change-up piece that is going to be able to really implement some of those speed rushes we haven't seen in a while, but certainly to me a rotational player to start.
Okay, and you've already mentioned the interior guys, Chris Jones and Kairos Tonga, the newcomer. Also in that group of interior players, Peter Woods, the draft pick, and Omar Norman Lott, who missed most of last season with an injury. So as the line as a whole, if we're projecting Karlaftis, Chris Jones, Tonga as starters, and maybe Gelati on the outside also. Is that good enough? Do you think? Is that are they? They're relying on a new face in Tonga in the rotation, guys like R. Mason Thomas and Peter Woods with, a relative newcomer in Omar Norman Lott. I'm a little wary about this. A year older for Chris Jones and Karlaftis still waiting on his big season. So, and then Felix, as you mentioned, Felix Enudike-Uzama, it hasn't happened for him yet.
Right.
Former first-round pick. I don't know. I think there's, outside of Jones and Karlaftis, not a lot of established talent for the Chiefs with this group.
Yeah, this is Kairos Tonga's first multi-year deal, bounced around the league, and really was brought in to be an upgrade for Derek Nottie and Mike Pinnell. And I think he will be. I mean, I think the Chiefs find these diamonds in the rough role players that seem to work out. And just the size alone, I mean, it's going to be tougher to run the football against the Chiefs in those early downs. Yeah, you mentioned it. I think Ashton Gelati rounds out those starters. Beyond him, it will be Felix. I think we'll get one more crack. R. Mason Thomas and Peter Woods on the team. Omar Norman Lott is your eighth. And then I wrote Ethan Downs in our way too early 53. It seemed like he has the favor of
basically the ninth defensive
lineman. He has the favor of Dave Tobe. It's someone that he likes. There's a lot of names. I mean, it seems like they're throwing a lot of names at the defensive line room. I know that there were some fans disappointed that the Chiefs weren't able to go and get Cameron Jordan because I would, sign back with the Saints. I would think that you'd feel a little bit more comfortable, Blair, if they could add a veteran with more experience and, more upside. But, they've done this a lot at certain positions. If you really look beyond them on the 90-man, and you're talking at least 9 other players that could come out of the woodwork and surprise us. The 53 projections, even in my final one, 3.0, is sometimes has 3 or 4 mistakes, because we're not seeing inside the facility. We don't know about the football IQ, that type of thing. I think the defensive line room could have one of these. They call them lottery tickets, come out of the woodwork and threaten somebody.
All right, we are talking with Pete Sweeney, Chiefs beat writer, and breaking down the Chiefs as they enter training camp on Friday at St. Joe. With the linebackers, the familiar names, right? Nick Bolton with the green dot, Drew Tranquil, of course, Cole Christensen, Jack Cochran, Jeffrey Bassa, those players. I think we might feel a loss here, maybe more than at any other position, and that's Leo Chenal with this group.
Yeah, it's an irreplaceable player based upon, I think, what Steve Spagnuolo liked to do with him, particularly almost like in a 5-man look. He would sometimes go out at that left end and be like a 5th rusher. I mean, who's going to step up and do that? Is it you do that more with a Tranquil? I think Jeff Bassa will get a true opportunity here to show what he can do on defense after really, at least from a defensive standpoint, not special teams. It was a redshirt year for him in 2025. I mean, it became a case where, Leo got a little bit of that joker role to him. It takes a very unique player to do that. he ends up signing with the Commanders just because, I mean, he was still only playing like 50-60% of the snaps. So you can't pay a player, that is that important to you, starter money if your E is going to be like a rotational joker type piece for you. I just think someone will have to step up there, and maybe it's not in the same exact manner that we saw Spagnuolo use Leo Chenal.
When we talk about the secondary, and we'll start with the corners over the safeties. Do you pencil in Mansour Delane as a starter?
I think he's the only one you could write in pen, other than I know we'll get to safeties, Blair, in a second, but to me, Alohi Gilman and Shamari Khan are the other ones that stand out of like starting roles. Yeah. But yeah, back to the cornerbacks. To me, Mansour Delane is the only, with an exclamation point, starter right now coming in for me.
A lot of expectation for him, maybe in the same way. You have to go back to Marcus Peters as a rookie at that position where the expectations are so high. 2015 first-round draft pick.
It's unique. Steve Spagnuolo doesn't like to play rookies early. That goes out the window when you're the 6th overall pick that you traded up for in the top 6 of the NFL draft.
So you also have Noel Williams and Christian Fulton and old friend L'Jarius Sneed back. They've got some depth, it seems like, in the cornerback room, but is it quality?
Yeah, I think that other, base cornerback position outside will be between Noel Williams and Christian Fulton. I want to tell you, like, L'Jarius Sneed's just going to turn back the clock to 2022 and threaten for, that outside position where you see him go inside. And I just don't know. Wasn't able to play a lot for Tennessee. I think, and you hate to say this about a player and just assume, if there's any player on the entire roster, Blair, that you would think, okay, who's going to be in the tent, within 3 or 4 days. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's L'Jarius Sneed. He could prove me wrong, and maybe the Chiefs have a potential starter there opposite Mansour Delane. I just tend to think it's going to be Noel Williams with Christian Fulton, being more rotational behind him. I think where it gets interesting is that nickel position, because you have a couple names, like Sneed can do that. Kohu can do that, brought in after missing a season as a veteran. You drafted Jaden Kennedy. That was a specialty in college. But just, thinking about Sneed, don't forget, I mean, he had experience at safety in college. Does he fit more as, a guy that can do a lot of different things in the secondary and knows the system, and the Chiefs use him a little bit more sparingly just based upon that injury history?
It's an interesting thought, maybe having him line up at safety. Having Sneed line up at safety from time to time. Another name in the secondary who's made some big plays for the Chiefs in the last couple of years is Chris Rowland Wallace. Maybe more of a special teams guy, though.
Yeah, there's just like a lot to sort out. I mean, he's been in that mix as far as the nickel. And I think this is a room where there's going to be a tough cut or two. You also have Kair Elam and Kevin Knowles, who we know the Chiefs have liked in the past. Melvin Smith is still hanging around, and you got some other guys behind them. I think the Chiefs have quality here, but you're going to need to sort it out. And don't forget, you've lost your top starters in those positions. There could be growing pains with even a name taken as high as Mansour Delane, which to kind of brings things for us full circle. Ashton Gelati, to me, under the radar, becomes maybe the most important defensive player to watch, because as your secondary is getting sorted out early in the season, and as Mansour Delane is getting his pro feet under him, don't forget Noel Williams is only going to be in his second year. That pressure on the quarterback helps the secondary, and that's kind of been the staple over the years of what Steve Spagnuolo likes to promote and do. And so it all kind of comes together, as you talk about needing to sort out, what it's going to be like in Dave Merritt's room.
That's why Spags, you always hear him talk about pressure, not necessarily the sack, but the pressure. The pressure right. affects the passing game, of course. You mentioned Shamari Connor and Alohi Gilman. Not much depth in the safety room right now. Jaden Hicks is back, and boy, he took a step back last season. They need him to progress.
It just seemed like they never trusted him. Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo are very good about not burying their own players. So when they even take a tiptoe of like a negative sentence, it stands out to you. Like, I always felt that way about Joshua Williams, who ended up landing with the Tennessee Titans. And I felt that way at the end of the season with Jaden Hicks. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo was open and saying he was surprised that Hicks was making mistakes, that he was. And, what did they show you in free agency? They're like, we're not comfortable with this. Let's spend some money on Alohi Gilman. That's why I tend to think that, they love Shamari Connor. They think he's a brilliant player, for better or for worse. Sometimes, like, you look at the defensive numbers and it doesn't feel like it makes all the sense. But yeah, it's just been, they're tentative on Hicks, and so you bring in Gilman, and I think they're going to have to get Gilman up to speed. But it continues the safety train in Kansas City, where they seemingly make it work with whatever name they bring in. It started with after Barry. It started with Matthew. Transitioned to Justin Reed, transitioned to Brian Cook. Juan Thornhill was in that mix, and seems like a position they're willing to rotate and go get players that are affordable and guys they think can do it, and that's how they feel about Gilman in my eyes.
Okay, let's get a quick word in on the special teams. I appreciated what Harrison Butker said when he spoke to the media a few weeks ago. He was honest about his self-assessment of last season. Started poorly, finished well, but he's just not used to having this the problems that he was experiencing in the first month or month and a half of last season. Matarazzo is back. James Winchester, of course, the long snapper. Are the Chiefs satisfied, or should they be satisfied with Nico Remigio as the return specialist?
Well, that's where the whole conversation about 53-man rosters gets so interesting, because if Brashard Smith were able to step up and they feel confident about him, don't forget 92 kick returners, so I'd have to take another player like a Tyquan Thornton, maybe Cyrus Allen, the rookie, could be in that mix, where if you're able to get comfortable with two returners above Remigio, which right now, let me tell you, is not the case, because Dave Toub loves Nico. Then you're talking about opening up a position for an Andrew Armstrong who flashed in offseason work. Jeff Caldwell, brought in Cyrus Allen's teammate as an alternate sixth wide receiver. Or, if you don't go down that route, does that open the door for Trey Watson? But it would be in my eyes the fourth tight end. And so I think it's going to be hard to shake off Remigio. Dave Toub just trusts him so much as that punt returning guy. But if Brashard Smith, who he's going to need a way to find snaps, even as a special teamer, is able to emerge, I just think it makes the whole broader conversation about what the roster looks like more interesting.
Well, we have the questions. Mm-hmm. The questions we have.
That's right.
Hopefully, we've delivered some answers. Great conversation, Pete. Get ready for the daily commute.
Yeah.
Here's what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. The United States, Mexico, and Canada can take a bow as host nations. The World Cup in North America concluded with Spain's 1-0 victory over Argentina on Sunday in New Jersey. FIFA's first 48-team event played to great reviews, and Kansas City should feel especially good about its performance. More than 400,000 attended FanFest, and around the same number attended the 6 games at Arrowhead Stadium. It'll be a while before we have final economic impact numbers, but I'll share with you what a server at Q39 told me over the weekend. Having 6 games in Kansas City was like having 6 extra Chiefs games this season, with the barbecue joint doing monster businesses on the day of games and the day before. Well, the World Cup is over, and that means it's time to turn our full soccer attention to Sporting Kansas City and the KC Current. Sporting plays at home on Wednesday, and the Current's next home game is July 29th, and they're going to be home again on August the 1st. And are you like me and would like to see Tyler Tolbert not pitch for the Royals anymore this season? Nothing against Tolbert, but he's not a pitcher. The Royals use him in blowout defeats like Sunday's 19-2 loss to the San Diego Padres, so they don't use up bullpen arms. When Tolbert takes the mound, that means things have gone drastically wrong for the Royals, and it's happened 5 times this season. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Let us know what you thought of the show with a rating or review, or offer up a suggestion. We'd love to hear from you. Big thanks to our producers, Gabriella Lacey and Suzanne Hogan, and to our editors, Hannah Wise, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.